Hello dear friends, in this episode I will be telling you the story of Hasan Sabbah. Enjoy watching. Long ago, in the shadows of history where fear and silence once ruled together, the world had shuddered before the cold blades of the first assassins. In the heart of Persia, in the city of Qom, a child was born who would one day shake the very foundations of empires. His name was Hasan Sabbah. From his earliest days, young Hasan Sabbah was different. While other children played in the streets, he looked at the world with questioning eyes, always searching for meaning beyond the ordinary. As he grew older, his hunger for knowledge was unquenchable. Mathematics, philosophy, and the sacred texts, he studied them all, determined to uncover the secrets that others ignored. Hasan soon realized that knowledge alone was not enough. True power lay in guiding the minds of men, in shaping belief and destiny, and in his heart, a dangerous ambition had begun to grow. Every choice he made, every step he took in those early years carved the path toward the legend he would one day become, the shadow that history never forgot. According to a legend, in the ancient city of Nishapur, a grand madrasa stood tall. Its marble courtyards echoed with the footsteps of eager students. Lanterns flickered through the night, and the voices of teachers carried wisdom through the stone halls. Among those students walked Hasan Sabbah. His eyes burned with intensity, his words cut like a blade. Every lesson in theology, every line of philosophy, he turned into a weapon of conviction. To Hasan, knowledge was not a luxury, it was power. It was the foundation of a new order. Beside him sat Nizam al-Mulk, calm, patient, deliberate. While Hasan's heart burned like fire, Nizam's spirit stood like stone. He studied law, governance, and the wisdom of empires past. His dream was not rebellion but stability, not destruction, but justice. And then, there was Omar Khayyam. He wandered between libraries and gardens, always with his eyes turned toward the heavens. While his companions debated faith and power, Omar whispered verses to himself. He transformed mathematics into poetry, and the silent stars into eternal companions. Often the three gathered in the courtyard, under the dim light of an oil lamp. The wind rustled through the trees as they spoke of destiny. Hasan declared, "I will raise an army of faith bound by loyalty and sacrifice." Nizam answered, "I will become the pillar of the state, for without order no dream can last." And Omar, smiling, whispered, "I will write of stars and men, for truth cannot be caged by swords or crowns." That night their words drifted into the heavens as if the stars themselves bore witness. No one could have imagined what awaited them. One became the sword of belief, one rose as the architect of empire, and one became the poet of eternity. They had studied under the same masters, walked the same corridors, and shared the same youth. But destiny scattered them, turning classmates into legends, friends into foes, and one night's conversation into a story that echoes through time. In the year 1090, Hasan Sabbah traveled through the treacherous mountains of Persia. He had heard whispers of a fortress hidden high among the peaks. When he finally reached the valley of Rudbar, his eyes rested on Alamut for the first time. The fortress rose like a crown above the cliffs, and Hasan knew that destiny had led him to this place. The fortress of Alamut stood like an eagle's nest, unreachable and eternal. Hasan did not see it merely as stone walls. He saw a sanctuary for his dream. He believed that within these walls he could create a new order, one that would outlive kings and dynasties. With patience and cunning, Hasan took Alamut without bloodshed. He outmaneuvered the local ruler and established his authority. From that moment, the fortress no longer belonged to its former masters. It became the heart of Hasan's vision, the foundation of his power. Inside the fortress walls, Hasan began to build more than defenses. He established libraries filled with books, schools where knowledge was shared, and chambers where discipline was taught. Alamut was transformed into a place of study, secrecy, and unwavering loyalty. Young men gathered in the courtyards. Hasan trained them in languages, philosophy, theology, and the art of the blade. He shaped them into shadows, patient, silent, and loyal. These men were called the Fidai, the devoted ones, who were willing to give their lives for the cause. At night, by torchlight, Hasan's followers swore their oaths. They pledged loyalty to him and obedience to his command. Each vow bound them not only to a leader, but to an idea that reached beyond life itself. From Alamut, Hasan sent forth his disciples. Their daggers struck where armies could not reach. Kings, viziers, and generals trembled at the mention of his name. Fear spread faster than soldiers, and the legend of the assassins took root in every corner of the known world. Hasan Sabbah ruled Alamut with strict discipline. He punished betrayal, demanded loyalty, and allowed no corruption. Even his own family was not spared from his judgment. Decades passed, and Alamut became more than a fortress. It became a legend, feared and remembered for centuries. According to a rumor, he was not just a scholar, nor merely a seeker of truth. Hasan Sabbah, with his sharp mind and burning ambition, found his way into the very heart of the Seljuk Empire, the royal court itself. There, among ministers and viziers, he sought recognition and power. But within the shining halls of the palace, a shadow awaited him. Nizam al-Mulk, the Grand Vizier. Their minds clashed, their ambitions collided. What began as cautious respect soon turned into bitter rivalry. Whispers of betrayal spread through the court. Nizam al-Mulk's influence was too strong, his voice too commanding. Hasan was stripped of trust, exiled from the palace, and cast into the world beyond its walls. Yet exile did not break him. It shaped him. The humiliation at the Seljuk court became the spark of vengeance and vision. From that day forth, Hasan Sabbah vowed to build his own empire, not of crowns and banners, but of faith, steel, and shadows. The fortress of Alamut lay cloaked in silence. Torches flickered along its stone walls, casting restless shadows. Hasan Sabbah sat alone, his eyes heavy with the weight of memory. Once, long ago, he had shared laughter and dreams with Nizam al-Mulk. Once, they had been bound by knowledge, by the pursuit of truth. But those days were gone, buried beneath betrayal and pride. He remembered the sting of betrayal. The vizier, seated in power beside the sultan, had turned his face away. His words had cut deeper than any blade. In those words, Sabbah had seen contempt, dismissal, and exile. Trust had been broken, irrevocably, and in Hasan's heart betrayal had become a flame, burning brighter with each passing night. That night Hasan called for his closest disciples. They entered the chamber with bowed heads awaiting his words. He spoke softly, but his voice carried the weight of iron. The time has come. The vizier Nizam al-Mulk has betrayed me, betrayed us. His presence is a threat to our cause. One of you must bear the dagger of destiny. The disciples trembled, for they knew this was no ordinary command. This was the word of their master, unchangeable, final. From among them one stepped forward, his face pale yet his resolve unshaken. "I will go, master," he whispered. Hasan placed his hand upon the man's shoulder. "Then go with the shadow. Let no fear touch your heart, for in your strike lies the justice of God and the vengeance of the faithful." The chosen assassin bowed, his destiny sealed in that instant. As the night deepened, Hasan Sabbah returned to his solitude. He stood upon the balcony of Alamut, gazing into the endless darkness. "So this is the path I have chosen," he thought. "Brotherhood shattered, trust destroyed, but power leaves no room for mercy." The wind carried his words into the void, as if the mountains themselves bore witness. And there, beneath the stars, he gave his silent blessing to the blade that would end Nizam al-Mulk's life. When dawn came, the assassin departed, clad in the guise of a wandering Sufi. He carried with him the fate of empires, for when his dagger would strike, the vizier would fall, and the world would remember forever the name of Hasan Sabbah, not as a friend, not as a brother, but as the master of shadows, who commanded life and death with a single word. Disguised in the humble robes of a wandering dervish, the assassin had passed unnoticed through the palace gates. Step by step, he had moved closer to Nizam al-Mulk, his face calm, his hands folded in devotion. None had seen the shadow of death walking among them. At last the moment had come. With a sudden surge of motion, the assassin had drawn his dagger. Nizam al-Mulk, unprepared and unarmed, had no time to react. In an instant, the blade was driven deep into his body, and a cry of shock echoed through the chamber. But the assassin had not fled. He had not turned to escape, nor sought the shadows. Instead, he had stood firm, his eyes unflinching, as if his mission was complete and his fate already sealed. Guards had rushed in, their swords drawn, yet the killer remained calm, accepting death as part of his vow. In that frozen moment, the palace had witnessed more than a murder. It had witnessed devotion taken to its darkest extreme. The name of Hasan Sabbah's followers spread like fire, for they were men who struck without hesitation and embraced death without fear. They had walked toward death without fear. Their footsteps did not tremble, nor did their eyes flinch. To them, death was not an end. It was a passage they embraced with joy, as if marching into eternity. It was whispered that Hasan Sabbah himself had crafted this unshakable devotion. He had fed his disciples with hashish, clouding their senses. And then, behind the fortress walls, he had revealed to them a false paradise. Gardens flowing with rivers, maidens with radiant smiles, and the promise of eternal bliss. And so, when his assassins were called to strike, they welcomed death as though it were the doorway back to that paradise, a paradise they believed awaited them beyond the blade. In the dim halls of Alamut, the old master had sat in silence. Hasan Sabbah had lived a life bound only to discipline and belief. He had rejected wealth and comfort, choosing instead a path of iron will. His breath had grown heavy, his body frail, yet his eyes had still burned with unshaken fire. On that final day in 1124, he had gazed upon the fortress he had carved into legend, and he had surrendered his life to history. When Hasan Sabbah's heart had ceased to beat, Alamut had not fallen silent. His disciples had carried forward his doctrine, shaping devotion and fear into lasting power. For generations, the fortress had remained a beacon of both terror and faith. Though the master had gone, his spirit had lingered in the stones and in the whispers of the mountain winds. More than a century later, in 1256, the mountains had trembled beneath the thunder of hooves. Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis, had led an army forged in fire and steel. The Mongols had swept across empires, and at last their gaze had fixed upon Alamut. The stronghold that had once defied kings and caliphs had now stood surrounded by the relentless tide of the East. The walls of Alamut, once thought unbreakable, had shuddered beneath the Mongol siege. Fire had rained upon stone, and screams had echoed through the cliffs. In the fateful year of 1256, the fortress of legends had faced its final dawn. The Mongol fire had scorched its walls, and the cries of the defenders had faded into silence. At last, Alamut had fallen, not quietly, but with a thunderous roar that had echoed across the world. The mountain stronghold was reduced to ashes, yet its memory had refused to die. For even in ruin, the shadow of Hasan Sabbah had endured. His name had lived on, whispered in fear and awe, carried through centuries as both a curse and a legend. Alamut was no more, but Hasan Sabbah had become eternal. Thank you for watching.